being on a piece of land with you,
Oh,
you
yeah.
know?
Commune,
you
Zindic
can't-
farms kind of stuff. Yeah.
Yeah.
You can't spell permaculture without cult. Just putting that out.
History is riddled with unexplained events. You can turn back now or learn the stuff they don't want you to know.
Guys, it's Durz here, and you can use this on the air if you so choose. In your latest episode of Strange News, you touched on the food supply scare in lieu of Russia's war with Ukraine. And I wanted to add something to that conversation, but it's not going to be the doom and gloom that it first appears. Hang in there. In that episode, and forgive me if I'm incorrect, I didn't hear you mention anything about rock phosphate. And now, rock phosphate is mostly supplied by Russia and Ukraine, so we're not getting that anymore. But before this war, scientists already thought that we were going to peak phosphorus by 2030. So what? Like, does that mean we just can't have food anymore because we can't mine this fertilizer out of the ground? I don't think that we actually need to. What do you guys know about permaculture? It's a system of agriculture that combines philosophy with smart farming. Google it. Using permaculture, farmers have reversed desertification of entire forests. We mine fertilizer to exploit a shortcut to a system that already existed before humans started interacting with it. Like, I make my own weed. I make my own fertilizer in my yard with weed. That's Korean natural farming, which is a little bit different. But anyway, permaculture at a mass scale, even to work, it's the easiest, simplest, and most cohesive way to farm. So tell me, is permaculture the stuff that they don't want you to know? Thanks so much for your show, guys. You guys actually cover the apocalypse in a really blessedly funny way, and I appreciate listening to you every day. Thanks.
What a nice thing to say.
That's so nice. Thank you so much, Durz. And Matt, you I'm familiar with permaculture. Actually, from some of my outdoors time, you spoke with Durz, and Durz actually wrote to us, I believe.
Yes, permaculture is interesting. I don't know much about it. I'm learning about it now, and I figure we would all learn about it together. I did speak to Durz. He's my new best friend. Sorry, guys. Y'all are out. Durz is in. That's just how it is. No, I'm kidding. He's just a very, very cool guy. Spoke to him a little bit. He's got a company that specializes in permaculture out there in Seattle, in the Seattle area, I guess. It's titled The Hermetic Order of the Garden Dawn. Oh,
wow.
Snap.
Sounds like a
I
cult.
love a good pun. Love it. Great job, Durz. Also, permaculture, as I'm sure Durz pointed out, while the term itself is from the 1970s, it's descended from some really, really old agricultural and husbandry practices.
Yeah, it's a lot of different things. Permaculture is many things. It is mostly, as you said, indigenous peoples' practices, right? That kind of got lost over time as industrialization came around, and now it's kind of, we're going back to those roots, if you will. It's a fascinating thing. I'll tell you, I'll just tell you some of the things here. By the way, his company is, quote, a secret society of plant lovers. It's pretty awesome. It's just, we talked about so many things. One of the most interesting concepts that Durz talked about is that people in general, our society, I guess, we see weeds that are on our lawns as problems. Weeds that are in our backyards as problems. I certainly do. I'm preparing to sell my home, and one of the first things I did to try and beautify this place to be able to make it marketable is to get rid of all the weeds. Every single one of them. Scorched earth, only grass will remain, and that's what I decided to do. And there are so many companies out there that will do that for you. There are so many products that you can do that on your own. And Dur's main point, or one of his main points, was that we should not do that. If you want to actually have healthy plants growing on that soil, one of the worst things you can do is especially apply herbicide and kill all those things. Anyway, as Dur said, it's way more of a philosophy and a collection of techniques than anything else, right? That's what permaculture is: philosophy plus technique. I don't know where to begin here, guys, besides this peak phosphorus thing, which is a real existential threat for me, even though it was kind of a theory for a while that we had to throw a little cold water on in the past. But at the same time, it's a real issue, at least when it comes to how much it will cost to continue, getting these fertilizers, the rock phosphates, out of the ground and then shipping them around the planet in order to continue our industrial farming practices. It is a bit scary to me. Have you guys heard anything about that recently?
Yeah, I know. I mean, Durz, you are correct in the way that the global phosphate rock system has been disrupted by conflicts. I would also note, to your earlier point, Matt, because we did discuss this, I think, briefly a number of years ago, saying that things are, like when you said we threw some cold water on it, which is to a degree true, we by no means said it wasn't going to be a problem. There are a lot of things that I think sometimes people don't take as seriously because they hear really hyperbolic descriptions of them. But just because one source is being alarmist does not in any way mean that the problem is not there. It's like the question about the timing of when peak oil will be reached. It's a very similar problem with peak phosphate. I think primarily because no one really knows. Like, we know where you can mine phosphate rock in a cost-effective way now. We know that there are certain areas that have great reserves of phosphorus, but we don't know exactly when we will see those affordable reserves exhausted. Is it going to be 50 to 100 years? Is peak phosphorus going to be 2030? The jury's out, and there are a lot of smart people who disagree on this.
To me, it reminds me of the rare earth elements or the rare earth materials episode that we did, where
Thanks
there's
to everyone
ton,
who wrote in. Yeah.
There's a ton of this stuff, rock phosphate and mineable phosphate, on the planet that we could access. It's concentrated in a few specific places where it's economically feasible to mine it there. But otherwise, it's just spread out in ways that it would be difficult to make a lot of money, or to have it even just a profitable company at all, to just gather up the phosphate in these various places across the globe. So it could be a really big problem headed our way. I guess the next thing we need to do is kind of define what is permaculture a little better, at least for my mind. Ben, you mentioned the 1970s is when the term at least came around. By a few Australian guys, Bill Mollison, David Holmgren, and they wrote a book. It's called Permaculture 1. That was really the thing that kicked off the movement of permaculture, I suppose.
Yeah. And you raised a great point where in some of the conversations you and I have had in the past, and what you just said now about your conversation with Durz, that there is a culture, a philosophy behind this. The idea, I think maybe for people who aren't familiar with the term, we could go to something you had linked to from NC State with their appendix on permaculture design. I think their introduction is quite succinct and covers a lot of the bases, especially like the 3 driving ethics or axioms of the belief.
Oh, yeah. That's a perfect place to start, Ben. I'll give you this quote that comes from that book as a basic definition of sorts, and then we'll go into those ethics. The definition is, quote, consciously designed landscapes which mimic the patterns and relationships found in nature while yielding an abundance of food, fiber and energy for provision of local needs. So basically, your local area using what's there and designing the thing out of what's already there. It's, in a way, it seems as though we kind of want the land to work for us. We want this land to make the corn. We want this land over here to make the wheat. And that's all it is. That's all it's going to be. That's what we're going to do. In this philosophy, it's way more like, well, what naturally grows over here? What's edible that grows in this land already? Let's design it around that.
The former idea you outlined is mono-agriculture, right? Those are the things where those are the practices where you see an entire swath of land growing only soybeans or growing only, one specific type of profitable crop in whatever current regime you live in. But for much of human history, this wasn't the case. People lived closer to the land and they were practicing the thing you described, the latter idea, which I think is superior. If you are in the United States, you might be familiar with the concept of the three sisters, which is the corn, beans, and squash. You plant them like you plant the beans at the base of the corn stalks, and they help support the bean vines as they grow and reach the sunlight. The idea is you can, by farming, you can look at it as not like as helping plants work together and people working with plants. You can also rotate the crops you grow in such a way that enriches the soil, rather than growing just one crop that over time could deplete the soil. So there's science to this. What we're establishing is there is philosophy, there are ethical guidelines, but there is, and I'm sure Durz, you have probably had to point this out to people in the past, there's solid science to back up a lot of this stuff.